Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Lens with Advanced Design. My name is Hector Silva, and today we have the pleasure of inviting an industrial designer from Salt Lake City. Please welcome Jack Marple. Thank you, Jack, for being here. A little bit about Jack. Jack is a senior industrial designer at Enlisted Design, where he has the opportunity to work with amazing brands to develop next level products. In addition to his work at Enlisted, he practices experimental art and design under the name Orchestra. Orchestra is a space where he can explore form, materials, and process to create expressive pieces. As a designer, Jack gravitates towards simplicity, balance, and white space with the goal to communicate and elicit emotional responses from his audience. That all sounds very enticing and very fantastic. Jack, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
And
of course.
very excited to hear about your work and a little bit about Orchestra. So for those who are tuning in, please utilize the Q&A section, ask questions. I'll integrate them into our conversations with Jack. And then Jack, the floor is all yours.
Awesome. All right. I'll just jump right in. Great. So thanks, Hector, for the introduction. I'll just kind of elaborate on that and talk a little bit about myself. I was born in the Midwest, born in Michigan. And when I was a kid, we moved out to Arizona, grew up in a really normal suburban town or suburb of Phoenix called Gilbert. Grew up out there and basically was into photography and music growing up. Did a lot of stuff. I really was bit by the creative bug early in my life, and was really interested in doing something like that for my career. But the kind of where I got to at the end of high school was like, okay, you can do a creative career and like make no money, or you can go and do something a little bit safer, like what my dad had done, which he is an engineer. And so I enrolled in an engineering school at the University of Arizona, and was like ready and all geared up to go into engineering. And because in high school I was really into physics, and so I thought engineering was like the right thing to do. And then as soon as I graduated high school in 2010, and so my dad had come across Objectified, the documentary, and so he actually sent that to me and was like, if I could do it over again, this is something I would want to do. And so I watched it and I was like, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. This is a mix between creativity and like the physical space, physical problem solving that I was intrigued with physics and engineering. So as soon as I saw that, I switched schools to Arizona State University into their industrial design program. And I was going through my old photos and I literally couldn't find any photos of us in the studio. So these are pictures of Google Street View of the buildings that I got my design education in, because we spent hours in that studio. I don't know why no one was taking pictures. But yeah, so I went to Arizona State University. I graduated in 2016. And while I was there, I kind of got my start at a really small agency called Satellite Industrial Design that was based out of downtown Phoenix. So Satellite, we did a lot of consumer electronic accessories. So like iPad mounts. I made an iPad, or I designed an iPad mount system that ended up getting made. We did phone, or like external batteries and phone docks and dash mounts and all sorts of stuff like that. Kind of lived in the world of accessories for the year and a half that I was there. So I was working there during school, and then kind of when graduation came around in 2016, I took an internship at Teague up in Seattle. So I went up to moved up there. I was up there for 2.5 years, um, and I was up there designing mostly stuff for the aviation space. I worked on a lot of seating products, which is a really interesting extension of furniture. In furniture that has to live on an airplane, has to be a lot more efficient, a lot more, and in some ways, a lot more comfortable. Um, Hopefully, with enough leg room. Trying to fight the good fight all the time to get the passengers more space and more leg room. But did a lot of work on business class seats, lay flat, and kind of like you see here on the right. This was a seat that we worked on that got a little bit of press here. But yeah, so I was at Teague for 2.5 years, and it was a really, really great experience. But towards the end of my time there, I was kind of feeling like I was getting typecast into an aviation designer. And I just didn't feel like that was the place for me, the place where I needed to kind of land. So started looking around, started reaching out to people looking for sort of a new challenge and a little bit more consumer facing products, and landed at Enlisted Design, where I am currently. So I moved down from Seattle to the Bay Area and worked with the team there for a little less than a year in the Oakland studio at Enlisted. And then a little over a year ago, last summer, we moved out and started this studio in Salt Lake City, which has been super fun. I work at Enlisted with a number of maybe familiar faces, one of them being Tyler Anderson, who teaches an offsite class. So for any of you that work with him, he and I are the young guns in the Salt Lake studio. But yeah, it's been really fun. It's been a really great team. It's been fun to kind of go from a larger group in Oakland, which was like around 25 or 30 people, and down to like kind of really small studio again, and with our 5-person studio that's quickly growing. So in addition to my work at Enlisted, I kind of do this thing on the side called Orchestra, where it's more experimental. It's more just kind of expressive of different forms or different materials, and I can get into a little bit more of what I do with that in a sec. So yeah, I wanted to take you through some of my some work samples. The first one is a project that we did about a year ago at Enlisted, and it was a really quick project for a company called Vacos, whose parent company is called Anki. It's a Chinese smart home device manufacturer, and so they wanted to create this new brand called Vacos and launch a video doorbell for the American market. So the prompt was really simple, and that's kind of why I enjoyed this project so much, was that it was just create a video doorbell that doesn't look like any other video doorbell on the market. So if you do a Google search of video doorbell and you look at it, it's really, I guess you could describe it techie. It's for some reason, this blue ring around the button became standard across more products than just the Ring device, which is interesting. So and if you walk by someone's house that has one of these devices on the front of their house at night, that's kind of like the first thing that you read, is this glowing blue ring on their porch. So thinking about so first of all, we saw that this was kind of a homogeneous market, which shows a lot of opportunity to do something different. But we didn't exactly know what we could do different until we started looking at like the environment that this lives on. It lives on the front of a home, which is homes. The best homes are architectural, and you should, when you're walking by it on the street, you should admire the home and not necessarily the device that the small device that lives on the front porch. So we wanted to create something that was more respective of that environment. And so what we the inspiration that we were able to draw is like what devices live on the front of people's homes. And a lot of people have these sort of decorative sconce lights or pathway lights or something on the front of their house near the garage or on their front porch. And so we drew a lot of inspiration from these decorative sconces, and we wanted to create a lighting forward architectural interpretation of the video doorbell. So you can see a couple of sketches here looking at how we tied the kind of the sconce lights that we were seeing into the forms that we were starting to create. And we ended up going with this very rectilinear, like sort of architectural feeling device that has this sort of beautiful sconce light that washes over this scooped out form inside of inside of this hard, sharp, rectangular form. You have this soft form where that accommodates the light wash. And the light wash isn't just merely decorative, it's also functional in the sense that the button and the hole for the button both have chamfers there, and they're there and they're polished to be able to make the light catch it more. You kind of get this light ring that goes around without having like an LED ring there, because the light is caught from the sconce light from above, which is, I think, a really nice detail. So you can kind of see that in context. I feel like we came away with a device that is more respective of the environment that it lives in, and is also a beautiful doorbell that I wouldn't be ashamed to put on the front of my house. The next project I want to run through is another project that I did at Enlisted Design about 6 or 8 months ago, kind of pre-COVID. That kind of spilled into COVID and created some interesting challenges there. But Allbirds came to us with another really simple brief, which was we want to create, and if you know Allbirds, you know about their brand of sustainability and low impact, and they wanted to create an extension of their brand and create a compostable shoebox that they could send out to their VIP customers on the initial launch for the Dasher running shoe. So the people that they were targeting were these influencers and celebrities that were going to get the first shipment of Dashers, and they wanted the box that it came in to be as special as that experience and also be an extension of their brand. So what we started to look at is how could we potentially do that, and we quickly kind of landed on a paper pulp, on a sugarcane based paper pulp, because it was going to give us A, the best finish, B, the best structure, and also it was going to tie in with the sugarcane that they were using to create the soles of the shoes. So creating, we felt like that was a really compelling story, and we wanted to tell that through the packaging. So started to look at a bunch of different forms here and kind of to see what would be the right thing to do. So the first thing that we pitched them was this kind of more traditional shoebox shape with a belly band that would come off, the lid would lift off, and then you would be able to see a panel here that would hold or hold little samples of the materials that went into making the shoes. And it would also highlight that it would highlight the sugar cane and the wool and all of those things. and then you would be able to lift that off and get to the shoes underneath. And what they really liked about this was this sort of delayed gratification, if you will. The lift off the lid to expect to see shoes, but to see a little bit more storytelling around the materials that went into making the shoes. And so we took this idea and went forward to refine it. And at about this point in the process, we also got images of what the new shoe would look like. And we sort of extracted the pill shape that we saw on the bottom of the sole, and created this oblong pill shaped package that would package the shoes in a really nice way. It would also be they didn't have budget to create like different sized packaging for like small shoes and larger shoes. So this was actually a really good way to create a packaging that wouldn't look like the small shoes were swimming in such a large package, and the large shoes didn't look like they were becoming too large for the package. So yeah, the part of the we kept the unboxing of the lifting the lid off, being able to see the story. We printed full color images there of the wool, of the tree, and of the sugarcane, to be able to communicate those are the ingredients that go into the shoe, and then you lift off that panel to reveal the shoes underneath. So you can see some of the actual photos of the packaging that was created. And I think it came out really nice, and was able to showcase the shoes in a really nice way, and be an extension of the Allbirds brand in a way that the package was fully compostable, bury it in your garden type of compostable, and it could be gone in a number of weeks. So getting into some of the more experimental work that I've done with Orchestra, the closed rack chair is something that is kind of a comical take on the chair that you have sitting in the corner of your room that just collects things, collects your clothes, your jeans, your books, your water bottles, whatever it may be. And probably most famously, you can see here that Bernie also has a closed chair, and this was said to be his most relatable moment to voters, which was when he was doing a live stream from his home and showed off this chair that was just full of junk. So I wanted to create something that in that same vein of a chair that could be intended to collect your things. So I created this chair that has, as you can see, no seat pan, so you can't actually sit in it, which is the ironic part of it. But it does well to collect clothes, collect all sorts of things. And so you can kind of see the process here of from sketching, kind of wanting to look at that form, how the form should be sort of soft and inviting, and then going through making these little small wire mock-ups, but also then investing in a pipe bender from eBay and some conduit to be able to, and it took a lot of time to get these bends correct because the equipment I was using is not necessarily the right stuff to use, but it was a really fun project to be able to try to make something this large and somewhat ambitious without the help of a professional shop. So really interesting to kind of see how this all came together, and I think it serves its purpose well. There's things that do collect on it. I just cleaned it off yesterday, and it had boxes and clothes, and it had a dog bed on it, and so it's been serving its purpose well. You can kind of see some of the photo shoot here. Another thing that I really enjoy doing and experimenting with are different materials. So the kind of the first place that I started with material exploration was concrete. Um, and I don't know if this is just because in my program I didn't have like tons of experimentation with, like, we didn't have a woodworking class, we didn't have like a class where you cast concrete and all sorts of stuff. So I may just be getting this itch out to be able to experiment with all these different things. But nonetheless, I kind of started with looking at concrete as a material, and then doing silicon molds and creating these sort of what I call moon trays, where because of the curvature of the inside um, of the tray, it looks like the surface of the moon. But yeah, it's just a catch-all tray to kind of throw your keys on, or small items on your desk. But really, really cool to start with concrete and kind of experiment with different mixtures and kind of be really scrappy and hacky with it. The first batch was concrete, like just the really cheap concrete, and I sifted all the rocks out of it. So it was like not particularly the right material or even the strongest material, but it was a really good place to start kind of experimenting with this. And then from there, I've moved into doing some resin casting. It's kind of a similar process, just with a two-part resin as opposed to a concrete, and you can use silicon molds as well. This is a resin doorstop that I've worked on. And then this is kind of the most recent addition to the exploration. Myself and a few friends have invested in an aluminum smelting furnace, like a desktop electric smelting furnace, to create these aluminum forms, which are super fun. So that's kind of the plan for this winter, to do more of that. All right, so to get into sort of the main message of the presentation is your style of design. And the reason I wanted to look at that is because style is, I think, in the design world considered kind of a dirty word. It's style is thought of as superficial, and I think it's because of the exercise of styling, or stylizing something. If you're stylizing something, the meat and potatoes of the design have already been done, and you're just kind of coming on and laying over this this kind of superficial skin to kind of convey or have it fall into the category of will a consumer like this or not? And so that's kind of a dirty word, or a dirty activity, you would say, in the design world. But I think that there's much more to this sense of style. And so I kind of wanted to dive into that and maybe look at the definition of style and maybe redefine it a little bit. So first of all, let's talk about what is style. I think that if you just look up the definition of style, you've got the first definition is literally just a manner of doing something. So I think style could be replaced with process in this sense, and I think that a designer's style is essentially what their process of going through the design process and coming to a final solution. But if you think about style in the sense of an object, and obviously an object can be in the mid-century style or the postmodern style or whatever it may be, but I think that an object's style is or swagger, or whatever you want to call it, is its personality. And I think that being able to bake an object, being able to bake style and personality and that sort of, if it needs to be playful or serious, whatever it is, baking that into the object, I think, is really important, because I think design without style is solution oriented, but not emotion oriented. I think having that eye towards style is is really important to connect with the human emotion. And you can understand it when you pick up a product that has been designed with a human user in mind, of being able to you understand that they're a human and they designed this thing for you, a human. And even though it's an inanimate object, you feel something. And I think that design should make you feel something. Ultimately, when you pick up, like the first time you picked up an Apple product, you understood, and that goes back to the famous line from Johnny Ive from Objectified, is he understood when he picked up an Apple product the intent of the designer who made it. And I think that that's really important. And one object that I think I felt that connection with most recently was the Casper glow lamp. So the glow light, everything from the way that it's executed to the fit and the finish, to the way that you interact with it, to the way that you charge it, and the way that there's the details on the charging, the wall wart, and the non-slip on the bottom of the charging. Is like everything was considered, and I felt really like, okay, this came from a group of designers that knew what personality they wanted to bake into their product, what style they needed it to be, and how they wanted people to connect with it. But I think if you step back and think about that from a bunch of different organizations, of like every designer brings something unique to the table. I think if we challenged everyone on the call to create a table lamp, you would have as many people as there are different concepts of how to execute on that. And we see that with challenges like Render Weekly, is like you put out a prompt and there's such a breadth of different concepts that come back. So I think it's really important that to know and understand that every designer brings something unique to the table. And here's a really good example of this. All three of these devices essentially do the same thing. They create light there on a table. The one came from the internal design group at Casper. Another one came from Branch, the middle one, and then the right one came from Visibility out of New York. And so you can look at all three of these products. They all tell different stories. They all have different personalities and different styles, and they all, even though they're kind of in similar quote unquote style, they're all kind of soft forms, and they're all very, very friendly and accommodating. They all have different personalities and different styles about them. So how does this kind of apply to you? What is your style? What is it that you bring to the table? I think that's kind of the question. That's kind of the quest of a designer, is to figure out your own style. I think you can go to school to be a lot of different things, and a lot of them don't require you to have any sort of like unique perspective per se. Like you can go to school to be an accountant and be a great accountant and have and you don't necessarily need to inject your own style into your work. I think being a designer and the creative nature of our work, I think the significance of an individual is much more important in our line of work and bringing our perspectives to the table. So I think figuring out your style, the first step is getting to know yourself. So going back to a picture I shared earlier, this is me when I was like 3, and you can see that I've got all of my Matchbox cars lined up and grouped by color or by material and by size. And I don't know why I did this. I don't know what was like hardwired in my brain to like want to find organization. I don't think anyone taught me how to do this type of thing. So I think my point is that I think that there's some things that are kind of built into us as people that again, that's what makes us unique, and makes every person have a unique perspective that they can bring to the table. Um, and I think my kind of craving for organization is kind of what propelled me into organization, cleanliness, communication. All of those things kind of propelled me into the industry that I'm in now. So I think getting to know yourself about like what is hardwired in you, I think is really a good first step. Another kind of more practical thing that you can apply to kind of figure out what your style is. One of my professors at school during my freshman year just said, start making a folder of everything that you like, everything that inspires you, or that you don't, if you don't even understand it, you just like it, just start to make a file of those. And so I created a Tumblr page where I just started dropping all sorts of stuff that I thought was interesting, and anything that kind of elicited an emotion from myself. And I think that was a really good way for me to start understanding what I liked visually, what I connected with visually. And that's a really big part of what we do, is connect with people from a visual communication perspective. So making something like this, whether it's a Pinterest page, a Tumblr page, whatever platform you want to make it on, I think something like this is really insightful and important to be able to understand, like, I like this, I don't know why I like it, but I want to figure it out. And then eventually you start to see patterns, and you start to see things that connect the dots, and you say, okay, I like that because of the color palette, or the composition, or the form, or the way that the light travels across it, or the color pops, or whatever it may be. And you start to understand kind of what you like. And I think that's a really important thing to take to the table when you're in any sort of design discussion. So in order to establish your style, I think you need to establish your preferences, like what, and that I think that the Tumblr page or whatever, Pinterest boards, are a really good way to do that. You need to establish your own process. And I've been lucky enough to work at studios where they don't necessarily prescribe you a process, but they let the designers create their own process and their own way of getting to the finish line, which I think is a really great thing, because I think that there's so many different ways to get from point A to point B, but and there's a lot of mistakes that can be made along those ways. And, excuse me, and there's learning that happens in every one of those mistakes. And so I think being able to define your process and then figure out what works for you is really important. And then establishing your own aesthetic principles, and that's kind of goes back to that Tumblr board, and kind of what you gravitate towards. What are the aesthetic principles that resonate with you, and that you want to achieve. And I think one thing that everyone should remember, if you're an intern or a senior designer, or whatever position you are in your company, your opinion matters. Even the lowest intern has an opinion. They came from they have these rose colored glasses on of the design world, and I think some of that optimism is necessary for good design work to be created. So having an opinion and not being afraid to share that opinion in any situation is really important as well. And I think this is just one tip that I would leave, is that finding a studio or a company or a leader or a community that share those same values that you've established in your style and your way of doing things is just going to make you so much happier. It's hard to be in a design review and have and be among people who don't all share the same view of what good design is, or what even aesthetic principles we should be striving for. Um, and I think if your life will just be so much easier if you're able to kind of find a place where you're comfortable, where your values are reflected in the values of the company, um, and uh, and those kind of mesh together. And that's when you are a good fit for a company, and company's good fit for you, and you'll be much happier when you're in that situation. So the last thing I would leave you with is find your voice and be confident in yourself and trust your gut, because I think your gut is a lot smarter than we are sometimes. So yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing all that, Jack.
Of
That was
course.
fantastic. I do have a lot of questions to ask, and we can just jump into our conversation. And
Awesome.
like I mentioned before, those who are tuning in, please feel free to ask questions. Um, but we'll get started. I think the whole topic of your style of design, I think that's a very, um, it's something that, like you mentioned, is to it's a bad taste in our mouth because it's the association of styling, right? And I think and I think when I was a student, I was very fascinated and actually got very intrigued with styling and my style of design. And I remember one of my professors told me to not be so, you know, pigeonholed in that area, because then I'm going to work for someone and I'm just going to be doing the styling of something. Something's going to be handed to me and I'm going to be the guy that styles it. And yeah, and that kind of scared me. I was like, okay, well, I shouldn't, put all my eggs in one basket. But I think you kind of, as you walk through your presentation, you give us some really good insights. And I think a lot of that comes from your experience working at Teague and then working at Enlisted, and both studios are located in a very competitive city, in a city that where there's culture and there's community. I would love to hear about, if you're a student watching this right now, how do you, how do you create your style of design? Is that something that requires time and experience, or is that something that students can start doing now while they're in the process of learning about industrial design?
Right. Yeah. I think one thing that I would say in response to your professor's comment of like you would you're going to have to style someone else's thing. Um, I think that I think that's part of it is being aligned in a studio that does the type of work that you want to do. And I've also learned that there's a lot of clients in the world. There's a lot of designers in the world, and not every client should be matched with every studio. If a client wants something swoopy, I hope that they don't come to Enlisted, because I don't think that they're going to be very happy when they get sort of a more geometric form out of it. And I think that that's kind of the challenge, is like, do we want to um, do we want to have something that uh, and that's always kind of a delicate line, is like there's a brand and we want to reflect the brand in the correct way, and but there's also like the brand of the studio and the designer and the sort of flavor that they bring, and that's definitely going to come through all of our work, and I think it should. um, Going back to how students can develop this on their own, I think the first thing is to, yeah, start an inspirations folder. Like start to figure out what you like, and what resonates with you, what makes you feel something as a designer. um, and I think that's kind of the first step. And I think then I think another really important thing is just start designing stuff and making mistakes. And like, if you design something that you really like, find out why you really liked that. And if you design something that you're sitting with it and you're like, man, I'm not really proud of this work, find out why that is. And and then and then kind of learn from that and grow, and not make those same mistakes again.
Yeah, I think sometimes that might be a little, just being honest with yourself as a student
Right.
or even a professional. Just I think asking yourself these questions like, why do I like this and why don't I like this? And trying to be just unbiased, and just analyze, your decisions. And I think that's a really good exercise that, um, a lot of us don't do because you were always on the go and we're always just on to the next thing. Um,
Right.
but I think that really develops your sense of, kind of like your sense of understanding as a designer. I think, because at one point you are going to be working with other people, and then you'll be presenting to clients, and you'll be, advising on projects, and, you have to be unbiased, and you have to convince other people why option A is better than option B in a very
Mhm.
unbiased way. It kind of goes back to the Cybertruck discussion or the Xbox or the PlayStation 5, right? Like,
Right.
like, yeah, one is better than the other, but you can say the complete opposite and have a very good, a very good justified answer.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to get around the fact that design is subjective in the end. It's like, and as much as we want to say like these aesthetic principles are like the holy grail of like, and we hold up Apple on a pedestal a lot, is like Apple has kind of created, but that was like it started with Braun. And like, are
Mhm.
those principles the holy grail, or is it, there's other people that have, like maybe the people who created the PS5 a have a completely different sense of like what good design is. And it resonated with some people. You can see that people online were like, man, I really like this. And it resonates with a certain group of people who hold those same values. So I think it's finding those, channels and those communities that you can, um, that, that everyone's kind of on the same page, and you're able to kind of, create, good work in that sense.
Yep. Now, I want to ask you about, you were working at Enlisted in the Bay Area, and then Enlisted decided to open up a studio in Salt Lake City.
Right.
And, when that happened, did they ask you, did they say, hey, Jack, we're opening up a studio and we want you to move? Or was it open for designers to decide if they wanted to stay, or they wanted to be a part of the new studio?
Yeah, that's a good question. It actually started earlier when I was, looking for kind of a new gig at the end of my time at Teague, and I got on the phone with Bo, who's the owner of this of Enlisted, um, and he was like, "Hey, not no one in my studio knows, but I'm gonna do this Salt Lake thing. I'm gonna open a studio in Salt Lake. I think it's a really promising market, and there's no one that's really invested in it, and so I think that it's a really good move. Do you want to be part of that? Um, we'll have you come down here. We'll have you work in Oakland for a year and kind of get like the culture, and then be able to move out and kind of start that up." And I've always, that really resonated with me because I feel like I was looking for something. Coming from Teague, we were very much a large part, or we were a small part of a very large company. Teague is still a large studio, but we were doing a lot of work for Boeing, and it was kind of just like a really small cog in a really big machine. Which is, I think it's a great, and that's totally needed and everything. But for me, I was looking for something more entrepreneurial, in the design world. And so when he kind of approached me with that opportunity of like, let's go kind of start something new and kind of see where that goes, it's, that was really interesting, and kind of resonated with me, and that's kind of why I jumped on it.
Hmm. And how are things at Enlisted and the Salt Lake City studio?
It's great. They We started with, I think, 4 people.
Hmm.
We hired one person kind of immediately when we opened up. In the last, um, I say, well, since COVID, we've Enlisted has hired, I think, 8 people across both studios. So we've been like really lucky and blessed to be able to kind of have the client work stream continue to come, and Salt Lake, I think, is going to be at, we have a couple people starting in the next couple of weeks, and I think we're going to be at a total head count of 8, um, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when we've essentially doubled in the last year, which has been great. Um,
That's awesome. I know that Salt Lake is becoming kind of like a small hub for tech and all these companies moving in there, and
right.
so that's kind of exciting for.
Yeah, it's really exciting. There's a lot of stuff happening. Kind of south, like we're in Salt Lake. If you go a little bit south, there's Lehigh, and there's a lot of tech companies that are there, and it's kind of booming.
So here's a question that's asked by one of our audience members. He wants to know. He says, as a fan of minimalist aesthetics himself, it can be often seen as lazy. As a student, should you push yourself to design more complex objects, forms, just to provide or just to prove your skill? And this is coming from Chris.
Right, that's a good that's a good question. Um, the I think so. Minimalism is an interesting thing. I think that people can write it off as lazy when it's done poorly, and I think that that's correct. I think that when it's done well, though, and when it's well thought out, like you don't look at if going back to the Xbox PlayStation, discussion, you don't look at the Xbox and you're like, man, those guys were so lazy, they just created a box. It was like there's so much thought and intention that goes into it. It actually creates creating a box,
Mhm,
is much more difficult than you think. And you can go back to,
mhm,
the Steve Jobs next computer, example of, he wanted to create a box with zero draft, and that was like nearly impossible to create this black box. Um, but yeah, I think that when you start to look at it, there's actually, and you look at it deeper, there's actually quite a lot of skill and finesse and subtlety that goes into making something that's minimalistic, but also functions well, and provides, a good solution and a good personality and a good, like, um, a good user experience throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that you can say that about that that doorbell that you designed. That the same thing applies. It's a very clean, design, and it has to be executed well, or else it could come off as, um,
As basic, yeah, right.
absolutely. Here is a question. They want to know, what would you say to the fact that a lot of those design studios have styles that are largely influenced by, not to brush over the fact that design history is largely white males. I think there's a lot of design in the entire world that isn't represented in the studios in America, at least.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think that and kind of going back to, like, there's no holy grail of like, this is the ultimate design, style, or this is the ultimate, design expression. I think that we still need to hear, and we need to hear more about from the voices of studios around the world that aren't represented in America. I think that, um, there's there's really cool work that comes out of Europe, but I think that there's really cool work that we don't see that comes out of, like, um, places like South America or Africa. I'm sure that there's people that are doing really cool work that aren't, like, necessarily big on Instagram, or like big in the consumer markets and Best Buy here or whatever. And, I think that there's beautiful work that happens everywhere, and I think that we need to, expand our minds of like what we think is good design.
And I think one of the reasons, like obviously we have Dieter Rams, his 10 commandments for what is good design. And I think, um, obviously that's something that he did, and those are his opinions. And I think education and the industry really took those commands to the next level, where
Right.
we made them like the only, thing that no one ever
Right.
questioned him. No one ever questioned, until most recently. In the beginning of COVID, I remember having this conversation with Spencer Nugent, and he was like, why aren't we questioning this guy who, which those, that's his perspective, what is good design, and they seem pretty legit, right?
Yeah.
Why aren't we asking what is good design? Why aren't we asking a designer from Africa, or someone from, the Philippines, or from South America, like you mentioned? Because design is different in different, locations from around the world, and it would be fantastic to also give them a platform. Um, and yeah, it's interesting. That's a very good answer, though.
Yeah, I think that Dieter Rams, and I'm a big fan of his, and kind of and I think what he did in the era that he did it, brought a lot of clarity to objects that weren't necessarily there. And I think that's great. But yeah, I don't think we need to stay attached to his 10 principles, or the forms that he created, just because he's doing it and then Apple's doing it. I think one of the um, I think I remember when Google was first starting to launch um, their their design team and kind of their design language, and I saw an article that was relating it to Olivetti. Olivetti, I think that's how you say it. Um, and that's and kind of the all the design colors and the more playful forms that Olivetti did back in sort of the same era that Braun was taking off. Um, so I think that there's and both of them are great products, and they both deserve kind of the seat at the table that they've earned. But and same with Google and same with Apple. It's like they're just taking two separate paths, and so it's like there's not one right answer. I think that there's a lot of right answers, and it depends on who you want to connect with and what kind of message you want to convey.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your awesome side project, Orchestra. I think because
Yeah.
people are excited about that. So, here's a question from Betwell. Hey, Jack, what is next for Orchestra?
Well, we're gonna do more sand casting this winter. I hope. I think it's more about just creating a space where I can kind of have a clientless environment, where it's just like if I'm at work and I'm thinking of some client project, and then I think, well, what if there was this cool thing, did this, and was made out of this material, or what if I could explore something like that? And I usually just like jot that down and like think about it, and then like revisit it and kind of let it think, or let myself think, and kind of let the idea develop, and then potentially spend too much money on like tools or something to kind of like realize those experiments, and kind of let that happen. So I think that's kind of, it's more just kind of I want it to stay in this sort of experimental, kind of bordering on art, but also using kind of objects to express and communicate.
Absolutely. What is a dream project or a dream client for Orchestra? I know it's an experimental brand, but
Mhm.
if you had all the resources and, you know, all the finan all the financial support, what is something that would be pretty awesome for you to do?
Pretty awesome would be just like to design out like the next living room or something like that, like some like large scale furniture project, where it's questioning all sorts of things, like how do we sit, how do we interact, how do we chat, where do we put our drinks, all sorts of stuff like that. I think that would be that would be a really cool project.
I feel like when you're talking about orchestra, one thing that as I'm listening to you, I'm the one thing that I'm getting from you is you talk a lot about the experience, right? And I think the product or the object is a byproduct of that experience. And I love that because whenever I teach design, I never ever talk about problem solving, or I don't ever talk about the object or the solution. I always talk about the experience first. And then you got to really go in there and really figure out what is this experience, and then everything else will fall into place according
Right.
to what that experience is. And that's how I see Orchestra. Like with the chair, I think that was a fantastic product, and well executed, because we all have that stupid chair. And it's whether we like it or not, like you made it into a part of our life through this art, through this object, which is pretty
Mhm.
fascinating.
Yeah, and I think going back to the sort of experience, I think that um, part of what part of the name orchestra came from, like, all of these products need to come together in sort of a symphony
Mhm.
and sort of an orchestra to be able to play together and create this experience that is our lives. And it's like we need to these products should enrich our lives, and they shouldn't clash with one another but should play in harmony with one another. And that's kind of one of the kind of core messages that kind of runs through.
Well, it's a fitting name for a fitting brand. So, with that being said, Jack, thank you so much for coming on Lens and
Of
sharing
course.
insights, sharing your work, and obviously Orchestra. It sounds amazing, sounds fantastic. When we upload this video up on YouTube, we'll link your social media channels to our description on YouTube. So for those who attended, thank you so much, and have a wonderful Sunday. Thank you so much, Jack.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Until next time, see you, everyone.
All right. Take care. Bye.